You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. Today is June 6, 2023. We did have a guest slotted for today, but it looks like we had a little difficulty on that end. But we have our own internal gun expert here, and that is our Screaming Eagle of Freedom, Tim Everett. He is a lifelong gun enthusiast, and he is also the admin of the Facebook Defensive Shotguns page as well. So we're going to talk a little about that. And James, maybe you could bring up that visual right now, and we could see if we could get a look at that. And so there is the Facebook page for that. So let me introduce you before we get into the rest of the show. This is going to be sort of a firearms Second Amendment focus show. So the rest of our group, on our lower right-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And of course, our expert in the lower left-hand corner today, our gun expert, is our Screaming Eagle of Freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today.
And Jason, it is June 12th, not June 6th, okay?
Oh, it's June 12th. Okay. I looked down at the numerical data. Yeah, we're just having our, we're misfiring right off the bat here.
Must be something about that date that's stuck in your mind, Jason.
I guess so. Yeah. Well, anyways, let's jump into it. So one of the big issues that we're always having is these gun grabbers who want to find any excuse to take away guns. But a lot of it, you wonder if they're just out there virtue signaling, because it seems like so many of these laws that they want to pass don't seem to make much of a difference. And of course, one of the biggest virtue signalers is our governor of California, and that's Gavin Newsom. And he is proposing a constitutional amendment about essentially having some gun restrictions in the Constitution to sort of counter the Second Amendment. He wants a 28th Amendment. And so let's see, I'm going to bring up the visual on that. Maybe we can see that. Okay. So it's Gavin Newsom wants to permanently enshrine gun control in the Constitution. And so he actually put out a video on this. And this is kind of crazy because he's a governor of California. He has the ability with the state legislature to put some of these restrictions in California, but he wants to put his brand of gun control on the entire nation. And he has almost no chance of this actually happening, which is kind of crazy. But let's go and hear from Gavin Newsom's own lips what he's trying to do. This is an excerpt from his ad that he's made on pushing for the 28th Amendment.
I'm proposing the 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution to do just that. The 28th Amendment permanently enshrines 4 additions to the laws of our land. It raises the minimum age to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21. Because if you can't buy a beer, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. It mandates universal background checks to prevent truly dangerous people from purchasing a gun that can be used in a crime. It institutes reasonable waiting periods for all gun purchases, and it bans civilians from buying assault rifles, those weapons of war our founding fathers never foresaw. This will.
Okay, so there you have it from Gavin Newsom's own lips, what he wants to be in our Constitution. And Tim, I don't even know what an assault rifle is. Do you think Gavin knows what it is either?
I don't know, but he certainly is correct on one thing. The founders never envisioned AR-15s or, weapons that, I know a lot of people like to go about, the definition of what supposedly an assault rifle is, that kind of thing. And, a lot of pro Second Amendment people like to get butthurt about that definition. And, they are quick to point out the differences between truly military grade rifles that look very close to the look of AR-15s. And, they like to point out the differences that make them more of an assault rifle than an AR-15 is. And technically they're correct and all that. And technically the people that are against ownership of these kinds of rifles by civilians, they're against that. They're technically incorrect about calling them, military grade or assault rifles and things like that. But for sure, the founders could never imagine it, but they didn't have to because they weren't concerned about, and they did know that there was going to be progress. They had seen rapid progress even in their own times of firearm development, and they were quick to they realized that firearms are going to evolve and develop, but what was good for the civilians to own was also the same exact weapons military owned at that time. So there was no distinction between a rifle that was used for bringing down game for the family table and rifles that were used to in the field of battle by armies. There's zero difference.
Tim, just to break in there as well, the at least one of the things I always hear Biden say is, you couldn't own a cannon back then, but I guess technically you could have owned a cannon back then.
Well, here's the thing about that. You could back then, and people did. Yeah. And you also can today, and people do own cannons. All right. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe it's not a howitzer, but if you found a used one and were able to buy it, you certainly could. I mean, but is a person going to use a cannon? And the other thing is flamethrowers. They put that one out there. People are going to go into their local 7-Eleven and hold it up with a flamethrower or a cannon. No, they're going to use a 9mm, and are they going to do a drive-by shooting with a single-shot cannon? No, they're
I just see pirates going down the street with just ramrodding a cannon.
Yeah. So I mean, the whole argument is just ludicrous. It's just to try to point out their position and that kind of thing. And I think the same thing applies to, the use of the term assault weapons or military grade and all that kind of stuff. It's just nonsense. And so anyway, I don't know.
Well, I know.
As far as Newsom, well, I was just going to point out one thing. As far as Newsom, I agree with Jason. I think it's just virtue signaling. It's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to die a very quick death. And so let's watch that. What do you say, Leon?
No, I was just going to say this whole thing about the founding fathers did not envision this or did not envision that. I mean, the mere fact that they gave us means by which we can change and modify the Constitution told you that they envision major changes occurring in society, in technology, or whatever, that we will have to deal with at some point in time. So to say that the founding fathers did not envision that we're going to have ARs or whatever gun becomes the new boogeyman is nonsensical on its face, because they did envision changes are going to occur in society and in technology, and we will have to deal with it in some form or fashion. So this argument is nonsensical.
Right. It's the same thing when they say keep and bear arms. That's enough of a general term to umbrella in everything that is an arm that is normally held and is common amongst the people of the United States.
Right.
Because that right is for the people. It's not for anybody. So we can talk about that later. But the same thing applies to freedom of the press. I mean, they didn't envision TV. They didn't envision radio. But that doesn't mean that the radio news or the TV news or computerized internet-based news does not have the same defenses against encroachment on that right for the press to be free to, you know.
And that's really
Exactly, yes.
interesting, Tim,
Yes.
because we're seeing the government try to constrain our rights to speak on those mediums nowadays as well, too. Trying to say,
Exactly.
oh, well, that's disinformation. So, you know, apparently if you put disinformation on a poster in 1776, that was okay.
Yeah.
But if you put it online, suddenly that's...
No, it was protected. It was protected press. But they're saying that, you know, they're trying to usurp or to infringe upon the press their right to speak freely, utilizing these kinds of restrictions. And what comes along to protect the right of the press is the Constitution. Why? Because, you know, it's just part of the First Amendment. So it's in an umbrella thing. It's in a general enough of an umbrella. So the verbiage is not super specific because they knew that it didn't need to be, and they knew that it was therefore going to protect no matter what happened to technology in the future.
Yes.
That they couldn't predict that.
Sure.
So his whole, you know, it's just got to be a pardon the term, bloodbath for his idea of this constitutional amendment. It's not going to fly.
I wanted to push back on, because both you guys have both kind of said this, and is it the idea that, hey, you know, we couldn't predict this stuff and we've made the Constitution so it's changeable. And Leon, you especially said this. Well, if I were going to be the devil's advocate, so in other words, the advocate for Gavin Newsom here.
You would not be an advocate for Gavin Newsom, okay?
Well, just to push
devil,
back a little bit. Yes. And so if I were going to be the devil's advocate here, I might say that, well, then that's what we're trying to do with the 28th Amendment. We didn't anticipate these Armalite 15s. We didn't anticipate, you know, these guns with, you know, high capacity, you know, magazines. So therefore, we want to amend the Constitution. So I guess how would you push back on that?
Well, okay, I would say the following, Jason, okay? And let me give you another example. When the country, when the country was founded, okay, at the inception of the country, U.S. senators were appointed by the state legislators, okay? They came along somewhere in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, and decided to change that. Now, I disagree with the fact that it was changed where they are now elected by the people. Because when the founding fathers envisioned this land, they wanted the House of the People, which was the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives, and then they wanted the House of the States, which was supposed to be the Senate. Yeah. So they made this change, but they went through a constitutional process to make the change. Now, I disagree with it then, and I wasn't alive then, of course, but I disagree with it.
Is that disinformation?
Yes. Are you sure about that, Leon?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Maybe I identify as somebody who was alive then, okay? So I disagreed with it then, and I disagree with it now. And I personally think we should go back to where the state legislators would elect the U.S. senators. However,
I agree too.
They went through the constitutional process. Now, if the people of this land become a little bit insane and decide to implement Gavin Newsom virtue signaling 28th Amendment, I am going to disagree with it. But if they go through the constitutional process, then it becomes the law of the land, and I'm going to live with it until we can change it.
Okay, I would agree with that. If they went through and you know, sure, but not only is the Constitution malleable in that way, but it's also broad enough, like I say, to go with the times, to flow with the times, and to apply no matter what happens as things change. It was so brilliant. Not only was applicable to the 18th century, but all the centuries thereafter, with its ability to apply still, no matter what technological changes occurred.
Yes.
In the future. So I think that's two of the things about it. But yeah, again, if people went crazy and did change it, now that doesn't take away my right to own firearms, because I have a right to defend my life, and therefore I have a right to have the best means of defending my life, which is a handheld firearm that's semi-automatic, usually. Not always. There's pump shotguns. They're not semi-automatic. There's revolvers that are not considered semi-automatic, even though you pull the trigger and it shoots, you pull the trigger again, it shoots again, you pull it, it's just a different method. That's all it is, a revolver. So, it still accomplishes the same function as a semi-automatic. So, in fact,
well, I was just going to say, keep in mind, Tim, you said you had the right to do that, but that's the whole point, right? If Gavin Newsom pushed this through, you may not have the right, because he may define whatever the heck you think you can defend yourself with as an assault rifle, right? And suddenly you don't get to have it, right? And whatever is an assault is whatever looks scary to Gavin is suddenly your assault rifle.
But this is just
I would argue.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
I would. Yeah, we'll go back to you, Leon. I would argue that you still have the right. You still have the right to own, the best means of defending your life. Maybe the government now has become so tyrannical that they have usurped your right to protect your life with the best means possible. And if to you that is a semi-automatic rifle firing a little 22, the AR-15 fires a 22 caliber bullet. Going fast, I'll grant you that, but it's still a 22. And if you feel that is your best means of defense, and the government has now made that illegal for you to own, it still does not take away your right to it. And that's the distinction that people need to understand, I think, is that governments have usurped rights for centuries. Matter of fact, that's the default role of government, is usurping rights.
Yes.
Okay. That does not take those rights away. Those are God-given or nature-given. If you don't believe in God, then it's still nature-given. It is your birthright as a human being to have the right to defend your life. And it is therefore your birthright as a human being to defend your life the best way possible with the best means possible. And so if the government's got a bunch of AR-15s that they're using, if the police, which is the government, also has a bunch of AR-15s, and they do, and they are using them to defend themselves, then you also have the right to defend yourself with that. Now, does the government take away your right? Yes. Oh, no. Sorry. I just see how easy it is to do. And
Newsom's got you spinning in circles now.
So that's the whole craziness of this whole thing. But if the government usurps your right to own one, that doesn't mean that you don't have it. It's still there. When they were running Jewish people into rail cars to the gas chambers in Nazi Germany, those Jewish people still had a right to their life. Okay, they didn't lose that right. The government came and quelled it or usurped it or infringed upon that right to life.
Well, but this is what we're all talking about.
But the same could be said about slavery in the United States.
Yes.
Just because they were people who were enslaved does not mean that they lost their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
But then this does beg the question: then why are we clinging to the Constitution then? Because if we're saying that you have these natural rights regardless, then then why is the Constitution so important if you're saying, well, it doesn't matter? Because I mean, here Gavin Newsom is clearly trying to do something with the Constitution where he's trying to infringe upon part of that Bill of Rights in the Constitution that was ensuring us that the government would not encroach on some of these rights. So it just seems to me that, well, we're just talking about different levels of paper from the government here.
Okay. Jason, this is where we get in the issue of perfection and what is good. Okay, it is true in a perfect world of liberty, we will have those rights and they will remain with us at all times. But there have been, and the founders were well aware of the fact that tyrannical governments do spring up from time to time, and they did not exclude the possibility that a tyrannical government can arise here. And this is why the Second Amendment is not some right to go hunting. The Second Amendment was designed so that we could defend ourselves against the tyranny of the government. That is what the Second Amendment is there for. Now, could the people become crazy enough and allow a tyrannical government to arise? Like, for instance, Gavin Newsom with his 28th Amendment, if he can go through the process and a constitutional process, and then this right of the government to restrict our Second Amendment's right, that could arise. But then we as a people have to fight back against that to ensure that those rights that are given to us, not by the government, but by God, remain with us. We have to fight against it because the founders were well aware of the possibility of the development of tyrannical governments.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, and I'm very hopeful that this will not pass. This will never be enacted because it would be a complete about face of the purpose of the Constitution, which is to preserve rights of the people.
Yes.
And what it does is it pigeonholes the government into certain powers and disabilities, is what they're called, and therefore, if it's disabled from taking away, infringing upon certain rights of the people of the United States, then its purpose is the Constitution. The purpose of the Constitution is to pigeonhole the government, not the people. And so this 28th Amendment is to pigeonhole the people, not the government. The complete opposite of what the purpose of the Constitution is. What he's trying to do is legislate through the Constitution a complete corruption of the Constitution. It's a corruption of it. It is evil in its whole process and thought behind it. The whole thing is evil and rotten to the core.
Well, the bottom line is it's this, I guess it's this virtue signal, and for us it's an evil, rotten virtue signal, but for the people who support him, this is a wonderful virtue signal because it's not going to pass. I mean, the bottom line is there's a lot of Democrats out there who do respect gun rights, and certainly a lot of Republicans and just about all libertarians respect gun owners' rights. So this is certainly something that has no chance of passing, but he's just doing this to essentially throw something out there that gets his name out there to the entire public. But one of the specific things I wanted us to move on to, and James, maybe you could bring up a visual on this, and that's the issue of age restrictions, because he raises that in his constitutional amendment, that you have to be at least 21. He says in his thing that, you should at least be the age where you can legally buy a beer before you can buy a gun. And I mean, I absolutely agree with them. I just think that age should be 18. I mean, when you're an adult, when you are legally of the age that you can enter into contract, that's when everything that applies to you, an adult, should come into play. But apparently the current law is that if you want to buy a gun through a federally licensed gun dealer, you have to be, or at least a handgun, you have to be at least 21. And I don't even know why there's a distinction between handguns and rifles here. It's just another sort of nonsense with the government. But now you can buy this apparently if you buy it through a private, dealer, but apparently you can't. And so anyways, there's a case going on right now, and it's called Frazier versus the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. And I guess it's 4 young men who are looking to buy pistols, and they're upset that they think the government is infringing upon their right here. So, like I said, this isn't across the board, because these guys could still buy through a private exchange, but they just can't do it through a federally licensed gun dealer. So I'll throw this to you guys out there. Does this make any sense? Wait until 21, and what do you guys think?
Well, as long as we have the right to vote at 18, as long as the government can give people guns to fight wars and kill people, it cannot make any sense to say that a private citizen cannot buy a gun at the age of 18. It's just ridiculous. The government has the right, well, I mean, if you want to call it a right, through laws, whatever, and that kind of stuff, to send an 18-year-old into a foreign land to shoot and kill people, but we cannot have that same right to buy a gun to defend ourselves at home. It is totally illogical and insane. So this whole thing about Gavin Newsom trying to gin up his base by saying, "Oh, you should you should be of the right age before you could buy a gun," it's nonsensical. It's irrational and nonsensical. But Tim, I'll let it go to you.
Yeah, I agree, but I mean, it certainly makes sense from their viewpoint, which is to it makes sense from their viewpoint of trying to have less people legally able to own firearms in the United States. That's their goal, and they don't. None of these laws. That's why none of them do anything for crime, because these laws are only intended and designed for law-abiding people to follow.
That's
so
right.
You would have to be law-abiding to not purchase a handgun if you were, say, 19 years old. You would have to abide by the law instead of just going down to the local street corner and buying a stolen firearm from somebody selling guns. That way, which is, you'd have a hard time breaking your way in there as a law-abiding citizen, unless you were able to dress the part or something, because you wouldn't know who to go to, unless, because your friends don't know their friends that know friends. And so anyway, this whole thing is designed just for us law-abiding people, and we're not going to be the ones. Usually, we're not going to be the ones shooting up schools and that kind of thing. So that's why it doesn't make a dent in the crime across the United States. And then, there's the whole idea behind. First of all, it's the whole.
Hold on now. Hold your thought, Tim. I just wanted to break in and say, hey, if you're watching us on public access, we're out of time on this part of the show today. Okay, well, we're back now, at least if you've been watching us, if you're continuing with the show online. Finish your thought, Tim.
Yeah, I was rambling there, but to finish up, this is about the whole 18-year-old to 21-year-old age restriction on the purchase of I guess he wants to make it all firearms, not just handguns. So, back in the time that they were coming up with this rule in the 1980s, I was very familiar with it, and there was a lot of anti-handgun stuff, because handguns today, same thing as back then, are the primary firearms utilized in crime. Easy to conceal, they're easy to find. If you don't own one, you steal one or you buy one from somebody that stole it. And
it's really that concealability, though, right, Tim? I mean, the idea that you can walk into a place and they don't surprise somebody with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you can surprise. You can do your dirty deed and then hide it and walk as if you're, minding your own business, that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's concealability and availability, much more available. So I remember back then, and they came up with this. Another ludicrous idea about, and let me point this out too, a ludicrous idea regarding moving the age to own a firearm, restricting it to you have to be 21 to own a handgun. So, and now, of course, they want it to apply to rifles and shotguns too, and they want to enshrine it. At least Newsom does, and probably most of the people on the left. They want, they're into tyranny, so they hate guns. They're into, they hate privately owned guns. They love the military. They love the government to own as many guns as the government wants in any kind. No limitations. They love that. They love guns. These people on the left. They just hate guns owned by people like me and Jason and Leon and everybody else. Those people, no, we are evil and we cannot be trusted. And they all think we're going to, break one day and just take our guns out and start shooting people.
And Tim, I feel like it's the same with speech, though. It's the same with speech because government loves speech when it's coming from them. But when it's coming from us, is that assault speech you were just using?
Yeah, that's assault speech. Yeah. So when you are of a collectivist mindset, and that's what people on the left are, they are collectivists. And when you're in that mindset, you are not, you do not like individuals. That's the domain of individualists to own firearms or to make speech or to do anything. You like the government to own firearms, the government to be the source of your speech that you listen to, because they are the ones in your miniature brain that has shrunk to the size of a pea. You are the one, or you're thinking that those are the only people that are capable of coming up with good speech or utilizing firearms.
Until the moment that they aren't, and somebody like the big orange man gets elected, and then suddenly all bets are off, burn everything down.
I forgot. Then all of a sudden we have to be warned about tyranny. Yeah, then we do, but not when they're listening to Gavin Newsom. I don't know what it is. He's a smooth talker. Maybe that's it. And
well, he is a smooth talker, no doubt about it. I mean, but just to expand on one of your points, Tim, all gun control laws are directed at law-abiding citizens, because there ain't no criminal is gonna say, they pass another this restriction. Let us stop our criminal activity and let us be good, productive citizens. That does not happen. So all gun control laws are directed at law-abiding people. Because if gun control laws were directed at criminals, truly, Chicago would have been the safest place in the United States, or Los Angeles. Some of these places have some of the most restricted gun control laws in the nation.
Leon, are you suggesting that because there's a law that criminals won't, that somehow criminals will abide by it?
It is self-contradictory on its face. The reason why we have criminals is because they don't obey laws, period. But these idiots could never see that, quite frankly.
Yeah, and so here we have another stupid law that he wants to enshrine in the Constitution, making a mockery of the Constitution, essentially. And it's supposed to apply to people that, even if you look at the age of the militia, our membership in the militia that we have as citizens that automatically occur when you're 17 and go until you're 50 or 55. I can't remember the exact ending date, but I'm past that myself. But anyway, I would still serve if I needed to repel an insurrection, or repel an invasion or quell an insurrection. I still volunteer in the militia as a good citizen of the United States. And I would, according to the Declaration and the Constitution, follow the dictates of the Commander-in-Chief, because he would be my Commander-in-Chief at that time as a militia member. And so there's that little thing that on its face would make this, and I don't know how that thing ever passed muster, that whole original 1986 law that made it 21 years old. I mean, that's ludicrous on its own.
Well, I think it was 1968, I think is what it said.
Oh, 68. That's right.
68.
I'm dyslexic. Yes. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm dyslexic there. 1968.
And it just said the federal government barred, so it may have been some deal where it was just a regulation type of thing, not necessarily statute or anything.
Yeah.
So,
and I was 16 years old at the time, and a gun owner for quite a few years already.
Yeah.
Thanks to my father giving me a semi-automatic 22 rifle.
Yeah.
My first gun at 11 was a semi-automatic 22 rifle. It's like,
well, I tell you though, aside from being vigilant against the government, I mean, we do have to be vigilant against our fellow citizens who happen to be aggressors against the rest of us. And Tim, this brings us to a good guys with guns moment. So we have a story from Los Angeles, and I'm going to play the video clip yet and then let you expand upon that. So this was a case where I guess a knife wielding guy was shot by a homeowner. And James, do we have the video clip that you
all night of gunfire? It happened around 9:40 last night. LAPD says a man approached his property with a knife, attempting to stab him. That's when the homeowner pulled out a gun and shot the male victim and then called 911. Police say the man, believed to be in his 30s, died. The shooting happening near 500 East Avenue 28. Here in Lincoln Heights, this neighborhood is no stranger to gun violence.
And so there you have it. Tim, did you want to jump in on this?
That took my whole thing out of there. It basically told the story about, this homeowner who shot and killed a man who lunged at him with a knife when he was in his front yard. This is just one of those examples of the tens of, actually hundreds of thousands. It depends. I mean, it's at least in the hundreds of thousands per year. Some claim it's even higher than that, approaching 1 million of these defensive gun uses per year in the United States. And, even if it was 100,000 or even if it was 80 or 90,000, I mean, that is reason enough right there to figure that, private citizens owning firearms for self-defense is a good thing.
And Tim, it sounded like this was a man on the front porch, but suppose it had been a woman on the front porch and this wacko with a knife was coming at her. She wouldn't have had any chance if she didn't have a gun, right?
Exactly.
Well, sure. I mean, neither would I. I mean, at my age, I'm not ready to duke it out with some, how old was this kid?
30 years old.
30, 30-year-old. Yeah. So, I mean, who knows the size of the 30-year-old and that kind of thing. But I mean, that's the whole point. And this is this thing about disparity of force that, for example, in England, they, it's got you can only use force required to, stop the person or whatever. Well, that's very subjective. Like Jason said, a young woman may need more force to stop somebody than maybe a big man might. He may only require the use of his hands and fists, whereas somebody else, an older man like me, may need a firearm myself. And so it's up to the individual, not the collective, to decide what is best for that individual to utilize to defend their life, their precious life. That even people on the left value their own lives, don't they? And even people on the left, if I ask somebody on the left, hey, if I just started strangling you right now and cut off your oxygen supply, would you have the right to resist me with any force necessary to make me stop what I'm doing? And I'll bet you every one of them would say, I hate to admit it, but collectively, no. But individually, yeah, I think I do have the right to stop you from strangling me.
According, though, to Gavin Newsom, if you're under 21, though, you don't have that. But by the way, James, can you bring up the visual real quick, too? Because I don't think we set the time frame for this story. And just so if anybody wants to check it out, this happened in August of 2022. So that's the story we're referring to. So it happened in Los Angeles. Go ahead, Leon.
but this whole thing, this whole story, and Tim, your statements touch on this also. But even the right of self-defense is under attack. We saw this with the Jose Alba situation in New York, where Jose had to Alba had to stab a guy to defend himself, and then Alvin Bragg his office at least tried to prosecute him. Actually, he was arrested and put in Rikers, but then the charges were dropped. Then we have this case with Daniel with Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely, and all the information we have so far is Neely came onto the train and was talking about doing all sorts of things and all sorts of harm to other people, and Daniel Penny acted in some form of self-defense against his own, potentially his own life, and that of the people who was on the train also. But the point of this, though, now Daniel, now of course Jordan Neely died, but
was Daniel over 21? Because maybe that was part of the problem here.
Yes. But now Daniel Penny is now facing manslaughter charges, but the whole point is, though, by the same district attorney, by the way. But the whole point is, though, the right of self-defense, even that right, is now under attack in many of these blue states and blue cities, and this is really a danger to us. This is a true danger to us, that we have to defend ourselves and defend our families, and then we're going to have the collective, the government who knows best in the heat of the moment. They know best. They're going to come after the fact and tell us, no, you did that wrong, and we're going to prosecute you. This is a real problem.
Yeah, it is, especially here in California, as everyone knows that owns firearms, that if they have to use them, God forbid, in defense of their life, that in California they're going to have to have all their ducks in a row prior to all their decision making that occurs in split seconds is going to have to be perfect. Otherwise, they're going to, with the luxury of time, be able to prosecute you because you did not factor this into the consideration, or you did not consider that in your decision making, and so therefore, you are guilty of a crime here for defending your life by taking somebody else's. Right. So it is a real problem. Not sure, what the solution is there. It's we live in a collectivist state, California. It's collectivist, and it looks like it's going to be collectivist for quite a while, unless it just completely dissolves of itself, through bankruptcy or something. I'm not sure, but we'll see what happens.
But I mean, you say we don't know what we do about it. I think there are some states that are doing something about it, Tim. I mean, Florida has what you call a stand your ground law, which I think, even though you can still be prosecuted in some of those cases, but at least there is that right enshrined in law, that if you are threatened in any way, you have the right to stand and defend yourself. This is what happened. This was the case with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. It was that stand that ground law that protected that caused the jury to come back with a not guilty verdict against George Zimmerman. Florida has that. Texas has an equivalent law. They don't call it stand your ground. I think they call it something else. But Texas also have that. And I think Wyoming does, or some other places do have laws like that. That gives you that enshrines in law that you can stand your ground and defend yourself when it becomes necessary, even though there are unusual circumstances where you could be prosecuted if they find that you cross some line. I mean, they thought Zimmerman I thought was persecuted. It was really political, really. I don't think that was really something that was where he had done something where he had really crossed a line. Quite frankly, I don't think he did. But he was prosecuted. But it came back not guilty on that.
Well, let me transition to our last part, and this really comes down to the whole point of having a guy like Gavin Newsom try and establish how it is we can defend ourselves and what it is we can defend ourselves. I mean, to imagine these people even have the knowledge to know what the right answers are in these situations. We find out most of them don't know what guns are out there, what their capabilities are, and they're just kind of talking out of their ass. I guess we're not on television.
Oh, Jason, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But speaking of talking out of your ass, let me bring up this story here. James, maybe you could bring up the visual here. So Biden, this was back also from near the end of last year, but he's talking candidly about what he thinks about guns, and he's talking about semi-automatics, which he referred to as just sick. And maybe we can bring up the video on that, because this is, these are the people who want to regulate your guns.
The idea we still allow semi-automatic weapons to be purchased is sick. It's just sick. It has no social redeeming value. Zero, none. Not a single solitary rationale for it except profit for the gun manufacturer.
Can you do anything about gun laws during the lame duck, sir?
I'm going to try.
What will you try and do?
I'm going to try to get rid of assault weapons.
During the
So this is a guy who wants to decide what your assault weapon is. He says semi-automatics are just sick. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but semi-automatics, that's like 80-something% of the guns out there right now.
Something like that, at least. Maybe more nowadays. It's the levels change here and there. My first gun was a semi-automatic, like I said before, that my father gave me at 11. And I didn't shoot the school up with it, by the way, just as a little aside there. Never even thought about it, in fact. Which is really the crux of the issue is why do we do have a problem with people committing violent acts, and they want to commit these acts, and they're going to use whatever means necessary. And firearms is often the way that they choose. They've run people down with cars. They've set fire to buildings and burned people alive. That happened in Japan, where they don't have any firearms. So what did the guy do? I think something like 33 or 43 or something like people were killed in that event. That happened not too long ago, a few years back.
Yes.
A guy set fire to an apartment complex and burned a bunch of people alive in Japan because he had he had a better way, just burn them, and that's very common throughout history, is to burn people in buildings to death or blow them up with explosives. They've done that too. So
ban matches then.
Ban matches, there we go.
Ban the match, ban the lighter.
Yeah. And so this guy's saying that, and listen to the tone, we allow the purchase of semi-automatic, and that's what he's saying was sick. When he's saying it's just sick. And
just to be clear, Tim, semi-automatic is one bullet, one pull of the trigger, right? That's essentially what's happening, right?
Right. Yeah. If we're going to define the term to semi-automatic functions, the function of it is that when you pull the trigger, the firearm fires, gun goes off, then you release the trigger and pull it again, and the gun goes off again. Because,
and according to Biden, that's sick.
No, that's not what he said. He said, we allow the purchase of semi-automatic weapons, and that is just sick. So he's saying what is sick. Now listen, this is important. He's saying what is sick isn't just semi-automatic weapons. He's saying the whole idea that the government allows the purchase of semi-automatic weapons is sick. Yeah. And no, it's not sick. They are the vast majority of firearms. If anything is in common carriage or common use in the world of firearms, it's semi-automatic firearms. They are in the vast majority of pistols. There are revolvers, and a revolver also. Pull the trigger, gun goes off. Release the trigger. Pull the trigger again, gun goes off. A different function or a different thing happens to make that come about, but it's still the exact same function. Is that sick too? Or is the allowance of selling revolvers, is that sick? You used to see Jerry Mikulik shoot a revolver. He can empty the revolver in about 2 seconds, all 6 shots. If that, I think it's even faster. The guy is amazing. But the point being that what he's worried about here, I assume, is the allowance by the government, the audacity that the government has allowed this, this horrible thing, the purchase of a semi-automatic. I guess he's worried about the speed at which the bullets can be fired. I'm not sure.
Kind of like the speed that he gets us into wars, I guess. And
yeah,
because to me, that's sick. The idea that we're all around the world getting ourselves involved, but putting bullets in people's heads where the citizens of this country don't even really understand where it's happening or what it's about. To me, that's sick. And that's what Joe Biden's doing. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. If anything's sick, it would be that, Joe. Not the fact that I can purchase a semi-automatic firearm. Most of my firearms are semi-automatic. So there you have it. I don't know what to say about that other than about Leon.
Yeah, but what underlines all of this thinking about with these people, especially these people on the left, like Joe Biden and company, is they believe that the mere access to a gun will turn a law-abiding citizen into a criminal. That's what they believe. Okay?
Yeah. They think you're eventually going to succumb to some psychological turmoil in your life, and you're going to
run for office.
Yes, exactly. Exactly the point. But the truth of the matter is, you see when like schools get shoot up and people die, especially little kids. Like we had the situation in Uvalde, Texas. We have had other cases. One in Memphis, Tennessee, I believe it was. And everybody and these people on the left, especially Biden and company. Oh my God, people have too much access to guns. But the access to gun is not the issue. The access to a gun is not the issue. The issue is the mental disease of the person using the gun to commit crimes. That is the issue. But nobody want to talk about mental disease in terms of the use of guns criminally. Nobody wants to talk about that. They always want to talk about the access to guns.
Correction. Yeah, correction. The left doesn't want to talk about that because that's not collectivism. That's about the individual. And the individualists like myself and you and Jason and most gun owners that I know of, they are concerned about the rise in the propensity of certain people to commit violence on other people. Why? Because when I was 11 years old and I got my semi-automatic rifle, my little 22 that I used to go out to the river and, go shooting at kildees and never hit one, but because they're too fast and too small. But anyway, it was having fun. Back then, people did not shoot schools up. Why? They're more easily obtained. I would go purchase my own 22 ammo from the hardware store by myself with my quarters that I saved up from doing odd jobs for my dad. And I would go buy a couple of boxes of shells and go out to the river and shoot them up. But, so why, with all that easy access back then, was there way almost zero until, when the guy up on the tower in Austin, Texas, I think it was, shot the school up with, that was about the first time anybody was out there utilizing a firearm to kill people in that I'm aware of. There may have been others, but they made a movie about it and everything. I mean, it was such a big thing back, and that was in, I don't know if it was the 60s.
I think it was 67. I think it was 67.
67. Okay.
I think so, but I'm not sure. But I think so.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it was in the 80s, but I can't
bottom
remember.
line, though, it's a while back, and we had a lot more access. Government was a lot smaller, and we didn't have nearly as much gun violence in
so
there.
What's the cause? Is it the use of psychotropic drugs for treating people for being fidgety in school? The little 7-year-old can't sit still, so they give them Prozac or Ritalin or something. Is it that? Is it the loss of the father in so many families? Is it the breakup of the family, the high divorce rate? What's going on? Let's look at those issues.
Apparently, it's about assault rifles. We've got more kids on Ritalin and more divorces because of assault rifles, because that's just sick.
Yeah. That is sick.
But we're about at the end of our show. We've gone quite a while today.
End of our ropes.
Yes,
could I just say one thing?
We've exhausted our clip, but Leon still has one in the chamber, so go ahead.
One thing. It was August 1st, 1966, Tim, that the shooting from the Texas Tower occurred on the UT campus.
Okay.
Okay.
Just to clear that up.
So I was 14 years. I was 14 years old at the time. Okay.
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 All right.
Well, yeah. Well, you've heard it. We've kind of exhausted this issue on Newsom. Emptied the magazine, so to speak, I guess. And hopefully, this amendment isn't going anywhere. But anyways, you heard us talking about it, and if you want to tune in next week, you hear us talking about something else around liberty as well.
Maybe next week we'll talk about the difference between a clip and a magazine, because there is a difference there.
Okay. Well, until then, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.